Oregon's Kayvon Thibodeaux making it clear he's ready to take his talents to Sundays. The star defensive end announcing Monday he's declaring for the NFL draft, along with skipping Oregon's bowl game at the end of the month. Only played 10 games this season, had to deal with an ankle injury that slowed him down early in the year, but finished with 7 sacks and 49 total tackles there out in Eugene for the Ducks. He's not alone. Plenty of others also declaring for the draft as well. Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral there, one of the stars in the SEC, along with some pass catchers that have definitely been jumping off the stat sheet. Drake London, Treylon Burks, David Bell, Justin Ross as well from Clemson, and Thibodeaux, of course, one of those top guys we were talking about coming off the edge there. We'll see how that pans out come draft day. All right, let's shed a little light on some of that talent. Ryan Wilson checking in here. And Ryan, starting there with Thibodeaux there, despite the production we saw this season, what did you see from him that makes him one of those top pass rushers in this class?
Well, you mentioned the injuries, Brandon. So he came out against Fresno State and was just tackling everything behind the line of scrimmage that moved, got injured with the ankle injury, sat out a while, came back, and was still dominant. So at the end of the day, if you're an NFL team and you need an edge rusher and you have a top 5 pick, Kayvon Thibodeaux is going to be one of your likely targets. He was going number 1 in my mock drafts for weeks, and then Aiden Hutchinson, through no fault of Thibodeaux's, surpassed him. But in my mind, they're 1 and 1A. He's incredibly explosive off the edge. The physicality, you see it play in and play out. Maybe Hutchinson's a little more refined, but Hutchinson came back for his final season, and we saw how that worked out for him. I think Thibodeaux is only going to get better. I can't imagine there's a situation where he falls out of the top 5 unless there's some run on quarterbacks we don't know about. He's a special talent, and it makes sense if you're going in the top 5 that you don't need to go back to college unless you're Andrew Luck. And Thibodeaux doesn't play quarterback. He's an edge rusher, so it makes sense that he would forego his final year at Oregon to take his game to the NFL, where he'll make a nice little bag of money there.
All right, so you mentioned Thibodeaux there, of course. Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. We've seen what he's done the past couple of weeks. What about Purdue's Georges Karlaftis? Where does he kind of fit in for you?
It's funny, Brandon, because until this year, George Karlaftis was the man in that conference, because we heard about Hutchinson, and I've said this before on HQ, that in 2019 and 2020, Hutchinson wasn't quite the player that he has turned into. Karlaftis was that guy. In 2019, he had something like 17 sacks. He was injured last year in that shortened COVID season for him, and this year he's come back and balled out again. He reminds me a little bit of A.J. Epinesa, who played at Iowa, was a second-round pick of the Bills, and is having a pretty good start to his NFL career. But he's a little stronger than Epinesa was coming out. They're similar height, weight guys, but Karlaftis is stronger. He's a little more stout on the edge, and I think he's another example of a guy who is only going to get better. You see these 3 edge rushers here, 3 different type players, 3 different body types, all likely first-round picks.
All right, 6'4", of course. You see the stats there kind of measuring up with Hutchinson and Thibodeaux there, of course, from Michigan and Oregon. Talk about pass catchers. Drake London, he only played 22 games over 3 seasons there for the Trojans, but one of those 6'5" targets that you can kind of pick up, you would need in an NFL offense. What's your thoughts on him?
Coming into the season, I'll be honest, Brandon, I wasn't sure what to expect from Drake London. I was talking to a scout back in August, and he said, listen, this kid is legit. I compared him to Drew Bennett, who was a good NFL player. He's more like Michael Pittman, his former teammate at USC. In 8 games that he played before the injury, 6 of those games, he had at least 130 receiving yards. That gets your attention. It sort of makes you feel like he's Justin Jefferson of college football, how good Justin Jefferson's been in the NFL, but a different type player, a big target player. He's not going to run a 4.3, but he'll high point anything you throw in his direction and come down with it, and that's certainly a need around the NFL. I've had him going to places in these mock drafts like New England, for example, New Orleans, places where they need to get that offense jump-started offensively down the field, and that's what Drake London provides. He's not going to be a 5'10", 185 type player. He's a 6'5" guy who gets everything you throw in his direction.
If you're looking at the Big Ten, Purdue's David Bell, one of those pass catchers there in that offense, had over 1,200 yards, almost 1,300, 6 touchdowns. How did he perform for you this season?
He had a great season. He performed well for me, for him, for Purdue, for anyone who was watching him play. Another big target, and he moves really well. And that's the thing about David Bell coming out. And what we've seen sort of in recent years, it doesn't matter the package that these wide receivers come in. They find ways to ball out. I mean, you compare him, David Bell, who's 6'2", 6'3", to someone like Jahan Dotson, who's 5'11", maybe, and 185. Jahan Dotson's a burner. Bell can get after it as well. He's just a bigger target, and in a lot of ways has some Treylon Burks in his game, a guy that we've talked a lot more about throughout the season, just because Purdue in this offense, we weren't so much focused on that. We were more focused on Karlaftis and the things he was doing on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, so another pass catcher you mentioned there, Burks as well. We saw what he did in Arkansas. Definitely a baller there. Ryan Wilson, as always, my friend, appreciate you breaking everything down. When it comes to those guys trying to take their talent to the next level, don't forget the guys in the Pick Six, always breaking it down. Download the closer we get to Week 14 is right around the corner.